Hello, my friends, and welcome to a very special interview today. I have a really good friend of mine, Kashif Khan from the DNA company, and we're going to be talking about this amazing intersection that's taking place right now between genetics and longevity. So, to me, this is a super exciting time to be alive. It's a really exciting time for the biotech field and an awesome time for not only functional medicine practitioners who Kashif and his team work quite extensively with, but with the public in general. And what I like about what's happening with DNA and specifically with the DNA Co is they're decentralizing and democratizing wellness. So it's becoming available to the average person to discover things that would have cost them tens of thousands of dollars to discover about themselves before and make very impactful and insightful decisions that not just help them get better in terms of their health crisis that they might be dealing with, but also helps them create a lifestyle design. So we've partnered with them for many years now, and we're deepening our partnership with them to help our clients even more because of some of the tools that they've just recently released. So we're going to be talking about longevity, we're going to be talking about wellness, we're going to be talking about happiness, and of course, teaching you how to live your best quality of life, not just physically, but also mentally and spiritually. So with that being said, welcome, Kashif. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's awesome to be here. And what you said is so true. Like you nailed it where, this thing where we used to spend literally tens of thousands of dollars. There's patients that you and me have talked to that have said, well, I paid $50,000 to have my full genome sequence and analyzed. And it used to be this needle in a haystack approach of like, let's scan this big data and try and find stuff. We now know where to look. That's the beauty. We now know exactly laser focus, like here's what matters and ignore all the noise. Right? We don't need to know how long my nose is. We need to know how long I'm going to live, right? So we laser focus and we now know how the systems interact and how it's more functional nature. So we can be more sort of certain about things. So anyways, it's truly an exciting time, just like you said.
I think Steve Jobs, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the first people to have his complete genome sequence. Do you know if that's true or not?
Yeah, early on, or very early on. That's Mansoor, by the way, was part of that pioneering group. When it came to that whole full genome sequencing. But again, it's that big data. Okay, I'm going to give you an encyclopedia. Here's all your genes. How much impact is it going to have? Right? What does it all mean? So we brought it down from 22,000 genes that make up your operating manual to 100 that actually matter. Right? But we're not talking about genetic conditions like sickle cell and things that you're born with. Chronic conditions, aging, longevity. There's 100 genes you need to look at, and you need to look at them from multiple different angles because this gene does this in this system, but it also does something in this system and in this system, and they interact with each other. So it's really cool. It's kind of like decoding, getting rid of all the noise and then decoding the core stuff and how does it really work. Right now we get the machine and how it works.
So just for our viewers and listeners, can you comment on the difference between genetics and genomics?
Yeah,
Because
sure. Yeah.
that's very key because there's some genetics companies out there, right? Genetic testing, but then the genomics is a whole different,
Yeah.
well, not whole different, but it's an offshoot of genetic information.
It's
So
foundationally rooted in genetics. And for the most part, the genetic industry is doing exactly that, which is what does this gene mean? Right? There's 22,000 genes in your body. There's a bunch of pharma, genetic, biotech companies out there. They're trying to figure out what does this gene mean? 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 That's genetics. That will do a really good job of solving really small problems, genetic conditions, meaning you're born with it. Gene variant equals directly correlates to a condition. And now you have to figure out how to either deal with it, some genetic therapeutic maybe. And pharma is doing a good job of dealing with that. But what we're saying is that's like 2% of healthcare. 90% of our problems, this is according to the CDC, Center for Disease Control, they said 90% of the US healthcare budget is spent on chronic conditions, which you're not born with that stuff. There's no gene variant that equals diabetes or that equals rapid aging. So what is that gap? And this is genomics or functional genomics, as we call it, suboptimal profile. The genetic companies are already identifying that person's at 80% chance of Alzheimer's. We know that. But guess what? That means the same genetics also points to 20% of not getting Alzheimer's. What's the difference? The difference is the environment, nutrition, and lifestyle load you're putting on that suboptimal profile. So if I tell you your cardiovascular looks like 80% chance of risk because you're South Asian background, you're not sick yet, you weren't born sick, there should be a way for you to die healthy. Those last 10 years should be great. That's by understanding environment, nutrition, lifestyle. What are the things that will trigger that suboptimal profile? That's functional genomics. How do we go from what does this gene mean to how do I actually apply it and stay healthy?
Yeah,
Right.
and that's so important because that's where really the opportunity is. That's what excites me because we're not prisoners of our genetics, right? We are actually free to make decisions that can positively impact. We can eat certain foods, we can avoid certain behaviors or engage in specific behaviors that give us the biggest ROI. And that's where, like, I work with people who want ROI. They want a return on not just their financial investment, they want a return on their time. They want to know that if I'm going to spend time exercising, what are the best types of exercise for me to do? Is it cardio? Is it weightlifting? Is it both? Right? Is it high intensity, medium intensity? What food should I eat? Right? If I'm going to be investing money on food, what food should I be eating, or what food should I be avoiding in order for me to maximize, my health expression? And a new report that excites us both is longevity. So not only do we have the opportunity now to, as Naveen Jain would say, make illness optional, now we have an opportunity to be a little bit more, or perhaps even a lot more deterministic in the length of life. Because once you solve the disease component of being healthy, right, now the question is, okay, how long am I going to live, and how long can I prolong the quality of life that I have as well? So tell us more about this, foray in genetics and longevity. I'd love to hear your take on it.
Sure. So our core test and report, which everybody kind of goes through, is foundationally what we believe after talking to thousands of patients, what everybody wants and needs. So I want to sleep better. I want good cardiovascular health because that's what everyone's scared of. I want good hormone health, cancers, fitness, etc. Diet, nutrition. I want my brain operating right. And I want to be immune strong, detox, immunity response. So those are the things we provide. Then we said, this is what people need and want for sort of, if you're coming to this fresh, how do I get version 2 of myself? You go through this. But there's so much more we can interpret. Tell us a problem, autism, fibromyalgia, aging, right? We can now reinterpret this sort of hub of science we have for that spoke, this new information. And that's what we did. We surveyed our audience and we said, if we can tell you one insight from your genomics, what do you want it to be? And they said, how do I add healthy years to my life? How do I live longer? But I just want to live longer. I want health span. I want good quality years. So we said, okay, we'll dive in with our scientists and our AI and we'll build a longevity report. So going back to what you said about, exercise, diet, etc. Not only what is the best, but what version can hurt you? Meaning, like, there's some people that for whom cardiovascular exercise will actually give them cardiovascular disease. And the one size fits all sort of cardiovascular is good for your heart is the belief is not true for, and I'm not talking about 2-3% of people, I'm talking about like 20% of people. It will actually hurt them. Why? Because they have, call it poor quality hardware here. They're not born sick, it's just bad hardware that's more prone to inflammation. And what's one thing that causes inflammation to here is when you get into high oxidative stress, cardiovascular output, and you create free radicals by putting it, and then that comes here into the bloodstream, reaches tissue that was never designed to deal with that stuff. And if you have the bad quality stuff, you then get inflammatory issues, which leads to cholesterolemia, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one simple cascade where it's not gene equals cardiovascular disease, but how do I actually get that disease? So now understanding what's good and what's bad. So we took that type of thinking and applied it to longevity. And you know what? I actually have the report here. I can show it to you if you want.
Yeah, let's bring it up. And what I'll do for people, just to give them context, is and this helps me in understanding that I'm fully understanding that what you're saying. So imagine if you were an SUV versus a sports car. Now, right, there's slight variations in how those cars are designed and how they're built. The clearances are going to be different. The suspension is going to be different. And one is going to thrive in a certain condition while the other one is going to struggle under those same conditions. So if you take a sports car off-roading, you're probably going to be in trouble. And it's not the car's fault. It just wasn't designed for that. So our bodies are designed perhaps to benefit from specific types of exercise, whereas for the person next to us, that type of exercise might actually be detrimental. Am I hearing that correctly?
Beautiful example. That's exactly what's happening is we are all designed different. So a Ferrari in the garage is great. Beautiful vehicle, it's tuned immaculately, it can do amazing things. Try taking it off-roading. How long is it going to last? Right? The flip opposite. Get a Jeep Renegade in the garage, right? You're not going to outrace the Ferrari, but again, off-roading, you're going to destroy it. So what are you designed for? And that we now have the science to read your human instruction manual. That's literally what your DNA is. It's a set of instructions that tells all your cells what to do. So if you have a different instruction than that guy or that girl or that person, the one size fits all doesn't work. And in certain areas, it's extremely impactful, which is why we have so much chronic disease, because we're all sort of kind of doing the same thing. Some people can smoke till they're 100. Some people get lung cancer at 40 from the same thing. Why two different outcomes? Because they're not designed the same, right? I'm not telling everyone to go start smoking and try it out, but that's one example of, you see that, right? And it's in his genes, but what's in his genes? What is it? It's not a magic smoking gene. The system that deals with the detox and that oxidation and all, et cetera, et cetera. So we now know what those things are. So you see the report here, longevity?
I sure can.
Yeah. So this is not the core product. The core product is a 360, which everybody get. This is one of the new reports we've created because everyone's asked. And what did we say? We said that there's a few areas that are not obvious that lead to that higher sort of quality of life and a longer duration. That's what longevity is, vitality and more years. And it starts with the brain. And it starts with, how do you deal with the big one, Alzheimer's, dementia, cognition, right? So we've learned there's plenty of genetic tests that will tell you got an 80% chance of Alzheimer's, but you're walking away with nothing more than anxiety because you don't know what to do about it. And now you're just sitting there waiting for it to happen. Whereas we can map out in the biochemistry, how does it happen? And tell you, we don't tell you about Alzheimer's, we tell you about ApoE, which is lipid transport. Your ability to actually deal with cholesterol transport. One of the root causes, your ability to deal with utilizing mutated proteins as fuel, which can cross the blood-brain barrier, which you don't want that to ever happen, which is why fasting is so important. Because when you're in a fasting state, you're going to use those mutated proteins and frayed amino acids as fuel because there's no sugar in your system, right? So we then rank. This is my report, by the way. These are my results, just so you know.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it's an open book. It's it's who I am. You can already see me, so I might as well tell you from the inside out. So Alzheimer's, I'm doing good in terms of my ability, not for some genetic risk, but what actually leads to these things, right? Now you compound that with insulin resistance, because although I'm doing great here, guess what? My insulin resistance sucks. So that may cause this to be a lesser of a result, meaning that I'm doing good with the actual biochemistry of lipid transport, protein utilization, but I'm doing really poorly with insulin resistance will exaggerate any minor thing I'm having up here. So I need to focus here, right? This is the one thing that could push me over this edge where I'm doing okay, but it could put me into the bad bucket, right? So now we get into recommendations. Now that we know this about you, what are you doing for diet? What are you doing for lifestyle? How are you going to mitigate these things? Then we get into stress, because what ages you? Cortisol and stress, right? Why do you see some people that have the exact same genetics but two different outcomes? Because of the load they put on it. And that mental resilience, people are wired for it differently. I do really well with the clearance of enzymes. So the stress response doesn't last very long for me. So when I'm in it, it's kind of like, yeah, I feel it, but I move on. And so I'm doing good here. So the recommendation is go ahead and be a warrior and do stuff because you can deal with it. But where I'm not doing well is the retention. I hold on to it. So I shouldn't be exposing myself to, I would not be a good doctor. Seeing blood every day, stitching people up, having people die on my table, that'd be too much for me. And that would age me rapidly because of the stress response. Right? So understanding how your brain is wired. Then there's serotonin. How do you actually understand, again, the stress response in the moment, where this is, how do you remember it, that imprint or that recall, what's the impact? This is how do you react in the moment. I'm also not doing well there. So I have to understand that when things are happening around me, lawyer letter gets sit down, somebody shows up late, I get frustrated, I got to tone down my response because it probably doesn't mean as much as I think it does. Right? I'm overreacting in the moment, that I'm more prone to the stimuli, whether it's positive or negative. But in this case, stress, we're talking about negative, right? So knowing this about myself, when somebody says it's not that bad, they're probably right. So a few deep breaths, calm myself down, realize this is just a spot in time and I have decades to go, right? So that realignment of thinking. So again, getting to the recommendations, the diet that actually affects serotonin and noradrenaline response. What can I do in terms of habits and lifestyle that now that I know what's going on with me, what do I need to do, right? So we've gone from brain to now body. The next thing in sort of aging is body and muscle building. So one of the biggest causes of death that we don't talk about is frailty, just old age. That's actually, I think in Canada, they said is the number one actual cause of death is people just get old and frail and they fall down in a bathtub or break something and they can't recover from the then infection or whatever happens after. Right. So muscle building and retention is super important because first of all, it keeps your hormone levels high, but also keeps you like, there's a vitality there, right? You're energetic, you're moving. So for me, I'm doing okay there. I do really well with muscle development because of my hormone pathway. It's very easy for me to do this, right? I go to the gym, I get results. I just have to make sure. That doesn't mean I don't do anything. I got to stay active.
Right.
But I'm doing well there. So it doesn't need to be a major focus, and I don't need to like hire a trainer. I just do my exercise and I'll be okay, but I have to do it. So we talk about that. So for the person that's not doing well, we need to work on that. And the recommendations for them are going to be very different. So going back again to body, balding and hair thinning, because of the same testosterone that's helping me here, it's slowly killing my follicles, right? Which is why we know in advance, I could test a 5-year-old kid and tell them what their hair lifestyle looks like. The longevity of this isn't that good for me, right? So, but we do get into recommendations because if you catch it early enough and we know why it happens, testosterone for some people converts into DHT, which is that manly man testosterone that allows you to have a six-pack and rip muscles, but it also kills your hair follicles. It's toxic. So if you catch it early enough, we know what to do to block that conversion so that you don't end up like this, right?
So it might be too late for both of us, but what are some of those recommendations?
Well, there's literally supplements you can take that actually block the conversion. There's a gene that's responsible to convert testosterone into DHT, and you can slow that conversion down. There's also a gene that's responsible to clear the DHT to get rid of it. You can speed that up. It depends what your goal is. For me, I prefer that speed that up route because I still want the DHT, but I want to get rid of it once I'm done with it. I don't want it sitting around. So I still want to put on the muscle and train and have the energy and all that. So I go that route. So we talk about some foods and supplements that are available. Then graying hair.
Sorry, to go back one step there. What are the consequences of excessive DHT? Does that affect the prostate in any way?
Prostate health, yeah, in a big way. So prostate enlargement is rooted in toxic DHT, right? So we actually use this to predict people's prostate issues. So one of the first thing we ask men is when do they start balding, etc. Because if it's a crazy excessive amount of balding very early, they need to be way ahead of their prostate health, right? A 40, sort of 45-year-old with a thick, lush head of hair, we don't pay that much attention to the prostate, right? So because we know that's fueled by estrogen, right? So now graying hair, the little that you and I have, we're starting to see those spot, me a little bit more than you. So I actually commented this to our own audience a while ago that if I knew this earlier, we're about the same age. I think I'm a little older than you. My beard would look more like yours because I literally could have controlled this. This is rooted in oxidation, SOD2, right? Where I'm not doing well. So if you're not dealing with oxidative stress well, there's a huge load on your cells, which is going to lead to rapid aging. So you should be dealing with this anyway. Everybody's talking about mitochondrial health. I know you talked about it a lot. Everybody should be supporting that because that's one of the roots for all inflammatory condition, which leads to diseases. But there's some people for whom this is a huge red flag, including me. I need to deal with it up front and be proactive about it because look what happened to me, right? This was avoidable, by the way. Not avoidable 100%, but you can slow it down. right?
When I see your report, I know you and I have discussed this. We have a lot of resemblances
Yes.
in our genetic report, so I
Yeah.
almost feel like I'm reading my report here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what would you suggest to somebody who doesn't who wants to prevent some of the gray hair? Is there some
My,
immediate things that they can do?
yeah, mitochondrial support, right? So you want the cells to be flourishing. You don't want them to have that load. So what is SAW2? It's when you go through oxidative stress, your cells take in nutrition and oxygen to create energy. In that process, you create oxidants, the byproduct. And now imagine having a fireplace where you're creating this fuel, but there's no chimney, and it just keeps piling up the soot, the smoke,
Mm,
right? There's nobody getting rid of it. So imagine doing that for, I'm 42 years old now, right? 42 years of that piling up, and I don't get rid of it. I'm minus 70% capacity for that cellular function. So I need support. I need mitochondrial support. I need detox, and I need the mitochondria firing hard and getting, so there's supplements. We make them, you have them. A lot of people are doing them now. There's a lot more, even than 2 3 years ago. There's a lot more available, right? Because there's more awareness. But that's what you need, is that mitochondrial resilience.
another quick question around that in supporting the mitochondria. I mean,
Yeah.
what are some of the other things that these people should avoid? So if somebody has poor SOD2 function, because I do as well. And
Yeah.
again, it's not about judging each other. This is
Yeah.
the hand we were dealt, but now we need to understand what is the best type of exercise for us.
Yeah.
Are we those people that are going to be more challenged with, smoking, let's say,
Yeah.
versus those that are not? Like, what are some other things that we should pay attention to with a dysfunctional SOD2 gene?
So the key is oxidative stress, oxidation, right? So going back to exercise, you're avoiding cardiovascular exercise, right? Because that's one of the roots of, imagine this process I said, of taking oxygen and creating oxygen. Well, if you're all of a sudden breathing heavy, there's just a lot more oxygen creating a lot more oxidants. So you can still train. So what I do is I do weight training. That's all I do. But I superset. So I'm never stopping. The 40 minutes to an hour, whatever I do, I'm constantly moving, but I'm not on a treadmill where I'm breathing heavy. Yes, my
Mm,
heart rate increases somewhat. Yes, there's a slight increase in breath, but I'm good. I can jump into a conversation, but I'm still pouring in sweat, right?
okay.
So I'm getting the cardiovascular benefit of the fat burn. I'm pushing my heart not into like 80%, but more like 60, right? And I'm not getting into oxidative stress. So if you're not sleeping properly and you're not recovering, there's more oxidative stress, right? If your environmental exposures, mold, chemicals, etc., are putting an additional layer of load, your body's already struggling and challenged with all what you're doing in terms of oxidation. You're creating more, right? So there's now multiple fronts for your body to fight. So reduce the load and increase capacity with supplementation, right? That's
Okay.
really what we need to do.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah. So skin health, again, rooted in SOD2 and oxidation, the exact same thing, but it's also hormones. So we look at the glutathione pathways and how well do you deal with clearing oxidants. But we also look at, say, SOD2, it's here again. And then we look at hormones, which it's not showing you here in the algorithm because it's one gene particularly doesn't do anything. We need to look at the cascade and your estrogen dominance. So for women that are like you and me, that are androgen dominant, that produce DHT, those are the women that are gonna, you'll see like that sort of cliche 90-year-old Asian woman who's in the grocery store walking healthily, carrying her bags, but she's balding and her skin's all wrinkled,
Mm,
right? So you have the vitality of the testosterone, it's keeping you youthful in terms of capacity, but outwardly hair loss, skin wrinkles, right? So that hormone profile is highly implicit in this, and there's things you can do when it comes to, again, slowing down gene pathways with the right supplements, right? But knowing what to focus on, first of all, comes from the report, right? So
okay.
now, and cellulite, again, rooted in, it's the opposite. You're where that was, the wrinkles are rooted in androgen dominance, cellulite is rooted in estrogen dominance. So I can testify that I don't have a cellulite problem, right? Because I'm androgen dominant. So I'm good wearing tight leggings. But if you have the issue, it's not a thing where like I have cellulite. No, you have estrogen dominance, and you can actually do something about it if you want. right? So, and then we get the last part of body is bone, where we look at vitamin D. And vitamin D isn't just about testing in your blood how much vitamin D you have, because guess what? Even though you have it in your blood, there's another gene. There's one gene that takes it from the sun, takes it from food, puts it in the blood. There's another gene that transports it to the cell where it's actually used. You may not be doing well there. There's another gene that binds it at the cell, right? And so there's 3 steps of the process. And if you're suboptimal in any one of the 3, and this is where people often get tripped up, where you're tested and you're doing okay, but you still feel the seasonal mood issues in the winter. You still have bone health issues. You still have anxiety issues. You still get really sick when you catch a cold. Well, it's because of here's the 3 genes. It's because of the transport and the binding. And this speaks to, again, going back to people like us that come from a sunny equatorial background where our ancestors were overexposed. So we do okay in taking the sunlight and converting into vitamin D, but our bodies evolved to not use it all because it was too much. But now we don't have that exposure anymore. We're indoors, right? So like you said, the car is doing a different job than it was designed for, right?
Right.
So this is huge when it comes to bone health, especially for women, when you compound this with estrogen issues, etc. So this next section, biodefense, is some of the more interesting things we do in terms of, methylation, your anti-inflammatory capacity, and this one really cool gene, FOX3. So FOX3 is literally the longevity gene. It determines how well you kill off like mutated cells, your stem cell production. So the actual things that equal longevity and slow down aging that your body is meant to do. We do this at different levels. We did some work on this gene, and this is one of the few areas where we actually point to a gene with a result and tell you something about it without it being functional in nature, because it's so powerful. So for the people that have 1 or 2 of these alleles, I'm somewhere in the middle, they do a much better job of killing off dying cells and replacing them. So you're, in yourself sort of aging slower, and maintaining a healthy stem cell production and attacking attacking infectious organisms. I find that as I get sick, I feel it's coming, but then it goes away. Right? The one thing that was missing was I was missing the vitamin D. Now that I'm doing that properly, that's true. This wasn't true 5 years ago, but now the combination of I have enough vitamin D plus this FOXL3, which I have sort of the mid version, it's actually harder for me to get sick. My body just fights off infections really well.
So this could explain why some people seems like they never have issues, right?
Yeah.
Like my dad is a great example. So I'm gonna get my parents tested. That's gonna be their Christmas gift for them, because I'm curious about this. And like my grandfather lived to a ripe old age, both of them actually, one into his mid 90s and one into his mid 80s, and lived a full, pretty healthy life, both of them. My father's father actually smoked. He actually smoked Indian cigarettes, BDs they call them.
BDs, yeah.
And he basically smoked his entire life.
Yeah.
And didn't have any issues. And he quit in one day, on the day he had to have his gallbladder removed. And he never smoked again for the rest of his life. And I remember him, he still had his mind was all still there, but he was very frail at the end. So I'm assuming he didn't have good, muscle retention, but he was bald. I guess he wasn't working out though. So maybe that's probably what it is, right? So
I think it's a couple of things. It's probably rooted in vitamin D. So there's a few things. Muscle retention, speaking to your body type and profile, probably coming from your, father, grandfather. So that's why they had that sort of resilience. They lived till 90 and they were still walking, running, doing their thing, because the testosterone, the single greatest marker for male longevity is testosterone. Right? Your testosterone levels are high, you're going to live longer and healthy and sort of be energetic and moving and doing things. Right? Then you got to look again at vitamin D, because underlying that is the bone, is the structure, the foundation good. And that's where in our ancestry, we don't do well. And that's where all of a sudden you have that age where you kind of cross this threshold and you just change. Right? Muscle's good, brain's good, but all of a sudden the body just doesn't do it anymore. And that's rooted in bone. But so hormones play a big part. Bone plays a big part. And then also cognition. Keep in mind that, thinking about the way you think, if your father and grandfather were the same way, they're just much more focused on reward and achieving, right? So they're not going to accept the aging and the problems, and they're going to just kind of push through it, even if they're feeling it. Right. So there's also that, the mental capacity, and how do you even perceive what's happening? Right. And knowing you, they're probably the same way. Right.
You know what? My dad has, I can't even remember even once in my life where my dad was laid up on the couch, like with the sniffles.
Yeah.
It's almost frightening. And I guess the same thing could be said for me. It's very rare that I'll have to look at this gene. I'll double check if
Sure.
which version I have, but it's very rare for me to come down with anything. So even people
Yeah.
around me will come down with stuff, and and I won't. And I know I probably have more self-awareness than the average person does, but it's good to know that we have a built-in level of resilience at a cellular level that also contributes to that. And I'm sure like what's coming up for me now is this report could also be used in legacy planning as well, right? For
Yeah.
people just kind of having insights and knowing, okay, these are the things you need to double down on. These are the things that are going to you need to take into consideration. And financial planning is important too, because I think for some people, they don't expect to live as long as they're going to live.
Yeah.
So they may not take care of themselves, right? So I always tell people, listen, if you knew you were going to live 50 years longer, you would brush your teeth differently
Yeah.
because you want them to last as long as humanly possible. So,
Yeah.
we want to use reports like this. I'm certainly using these reports for my benefit, my family's benefit, and my clients' benefit. But it's great to see that this information is now available. In my opinion, in an extremely affordable way and easy. You don't have to be sick to do this. You don't have to be ultra wealthy to be able to do this. This is accessible to the average person. And with a game plan, I mean, this could be, it has been for me and certainly can be for anyone doing this, transformational information.
Yeah. To your point, people were kind of going in blind, it's all trial and error. And this is why the solutions that you buy are all one size fits all, because we don't know who we are. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to, the drugstore or wherever, you're pulling things off the shelf that may or may not work on you, because the claim of sleep or whatever you're buying, it worked really well in some trial with some person, but maybe that person wasn't genetically like you, or maybe it's going to work really well on you, like super well, but it doesn't work on everybody else. So this just takes the trial and error out of things. You know where to focus, right? So glutathionization, that key detox system, we map out the genes there and tell you how you're doing, because in terms of fatigue, toxic exposure, heavy metals, chemicals, even things entering your gut, when you're dealing with even something as simple as mold on food, that you may not even realize is there. We had one patient who, the thing that it came down to was that he ate a lot of watermelon and didn't realize that watermelons grow sitting on the ground, and so they develop mold. And when you push your knife through, you're pushing the mold into the flesh that you then eat. Right. And he would have watermelon literally daily. And it was like audit question, we couldn't. And this was the thing we literally figured out that he was missing. So here, like myself, I have 0 copies. So this is one of the few genes where it's not about what version do you have or what SNP or what variant. You could not even have the gene. Or you could have an extra copy. So for me, 0. I don't have the gut detox genes. So like that other person, if I eat a watermelon with mold on it and I'm licking the peel and the knife puts the thing, I'm going to have a gut issue. I'm going to get bloated. I won't be hungry for dinner. I might even get gassy or whatever, because I don't detox that stuff.
So
Right.
what do you do in a case like that? Stop
You
eating
wash the
watermelon
watermelon.
or wash it? Oh, he wasn't even washing it. Okay.
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, there's things you can do. There's sprays that you can use to clean vegetables, whatever, right? But it's that, honestly, it was that one thing of cut the, like, first of all, it's usually on one side, right? So we told him cut that off and then use a new knife to cut into the flesh and wash it first. So he didn't realize this was the thing that was causing him his migraines and brain fog, and I'm sure there was more going on than just that, but that one thing he eliminated made a big change for him. So
Wow.
now we look at methylation, which is your anti-inflammatory response. So whether you are detoxing, not detoxing, your body is fighting some level of inflammation, right? So methylation is that system. And most people, when you look at genetic reports, you see this MTHFR. That's what's known as methylation. But this is one gene in a system. You could have the best MTHFR like me, but everything else sucks, right? So that's like saying you have a Ferrari with like flat tires and no exhaust system, and the whole system has to work, right? So look at here, where I typically in a genetic test, I would be told methylation, great, MTHFR, thumbs up. But look at here, half the system is not doing its job, more than half, right?
Mm.
And I have the worst version here and the worst version here, both the GG, like the bad version. So this is has to do with the B12 version. This has to do with B12 metabolization. So I actually have to take B12 sublingual under the tongue. When I swallow a pill, I just pee it out. I can't even metabolize it because my gut has the bad version of this gene. Right?
Love it.
Yeah. So that's so anyway, so that's now methylation, which is the last piece now of all that's what's happening. If you are now under some sort of call it inflammatory response, here's how you deal with it. And now we know we need to support this and this and this and this, right? So that's that report. So I'm going to stop the share now. And that's what we came up with to answer people's questions of what questions can we ask our DNA to add 10 healthy years to our life? And this is what it led us to.
So super insightful. I'm excited to get my report. Are these available to the public just yet, or is there a timeline until they'll be available?
So it's not on the website yet. We've been working with clinicians sort of in the background to test and get their feedback. And we always do that before we release things wide, because our clinician community, it's awesome. They actually will advise us on what, patients ask about this and they ask about this. And we'll actually add that in and then alter our algorithm and AI to populate that. And we've got that done now. So I know it's not up on the website, but I do believe that if you buy the 360 report, which is on the website, you can then ask for the anti-aging report and they'll tack it on. I think it's another $90 or something for the anti-aging report.
Okay, beautiful. So I would love to know, based on your genetics, what changes have you made to your day-to-day life?
Okay, yeah, that's I'm a different person. Let's just say that, right? So pre-understanding my genetics, eczema, psoriasis, migraines. I used to be driven home by my business partner vomiting with migraines that were so intense, and I would just have to sleep. I couldn't function. Also, like mental health in terms of depression, anxiety, all that stuff. So, anyways, I don't have any of that anymore. I used to get sick 2 or 3 times a year in bed, right? Like the common cold, the flu. I don't get sick anymore. So all of that stuff. What I changed was I first understood why all of this is happening. And the problem with the way I was dealing with it by going to my doctor is each thing was being treated as a different thing. Here's your cream for the psoriasis. Even the 2 skin conditions were 2 different creams, right? Here's your eczema cream. Here's your psoriasis cream. Here's your migraine pill. Here's your sedation. Like, let's make you feel calm with the pill for your mental health issues, right? So it was all being treated. But what I found through genetics is this was all the same thing. There's that central hub of there's certain things I don't do right. Now, what spoke or symptoms are going to pop up just depends what exposure, right? So my chemical environmental exposure was causing the eczema and psoriasis, but all of this was rooted in glutathione pathway, like that detox pathway, right? The migraines, all of it. So anyways, supplementing heavily with the same types of supplements we recommend, which then starts making you think different about food, about exercise, right? And you start to do things. And we always say that there's one thing to give you, here's your stack of DNA info. If you're not going to change your behaviors, it doesn't mean anything. So getting from discovery, I now know it, to activation, or sorry, prior to that is even navigation. I've discovered it. So navigation is now, how do I dive deep and learn how to use this information and start to adopt new behaviors? Then there's like activation. I own this behavior. I'm going to do it. Pick one thing, right? I want to sleep better. So I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to turn the lights off or turn them low 2 hours before bedtime. One small habit, right? Then you get to the point where your identity's changed, where you now do that thing. And that's where I'm at now. I can't go back to eating a certain way, not taking my supplements, not sleeping on time. I can't even believe that person existed anymore.
Wow.
right?
So truly transformational once you have
Yeah,
this information and you
yeah,
experience the benefits in a short period of time, because now you're aligning with, who you truly are, and partnering with yourself, if you will, right? It's kind of
yeah.
this newfound partnership with your genes and your cells and your environment that allows you to live a super high quality life. Uh,
And when you're struggling with trial and error, the problem is there's so much error that you lose hope, right?
mm,
There's when you're taking the one size fits all stuff off the shelf, some will work, some will work, and that's when you start to believe that you just have this problem. Oh, the migraine pill doesn't work on me. I have a migraine problem. When there's layers to the onion, peel it back. There's something going on. You weren't born with a migraine problem. Why did it start when you were 25, 30, 40? Because it took that many years of doing the wrong thing to lead to that crossing the threshold,
hmm.
right?
I love that. This is a super fascinating conversation. Thank you. And greatly appreciate you willing to share your reports with us and taking a deep dive in the longevity report. What are some of the other reports that are available to people when they get the 360 report?
So the core 360 gives you the 6 things that we believe everyone needs after dealing with thousands of patients and understanding, what made them better. Sleep, right? I can't fall asleep. I can't stay asleep. I wake up not feeling rested. So all of that and the genetics of why that happens and what to do about it. Mood and behavior, which is actually the biggest report. So if I have your DNA and I never talk to you, I know exactly how you deal with procrastination, irritability, stress, trauma, PTSD, anxiety, all that stuff. So it's all mapped out so you know who you are and what to do about it. Cardiovascular health, which is, cholesterolemia, diabetes, hypertension, blood pressure, stroke, dementia, all that stuff. Diet and nutrition. Should I be on a keto diet? Should I be on a paleo? Can I be a vegan? I can't tell you how many people we've had to tell them that you actually cannot be a vegan. You're going to get sick. But there's some people where we tell them you'd be a great vegan, right? We know up front you don't need that trial and error. This doesn't feel right. Let me try something else.
Is that the FUT2 gene?
The FUT2 gene, exactly. Yeah. So
Okay.
the enzymes that are required to break down the main protein sources, beans, legumes, this is why so many people eat hummus and then they're just bloated. You'd think it's health food for the right person. For me personally, by the way, I have the worst FUT2. So if I eat hummus for lunch, I can't eat dinner. I'm just full.
Hmm.
My body's struggling with it so much, right? Because that chickpea, that lentil, the bean, legume, I was not designed to break that stuff down. So then there's fitness and hormones. So there's where you're at and what your goal is with your body, whatever that is. How do you get there? Why do people always hit plateaus? Because you're trying to do what everybody else does. Maybe you're not designed for that, or maybe you have the wrong goal, or maybe you're going to the goal the wrong way. Then there's like skin, hair, all the stuff that around hormones in that. And the last one is immunity, which is detox and anti-inflammatory response. So a lot of what we touched on here. So there's bits and pieces of this longevity report in the 360, right? What we've said is we're going to drive all that and pack it into one report that's interpreted now for this purpose.
Mm.
And that's what our scientists have done.
All right. I love it. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for all the work that you're doing at DNA Company. Tell us what's down the pipeline for you guys. What are you guys working on next?
So we're now going to be, so the longevity is the first sort of deep dive report we built. And we've surveyed, again, our audience to figure out what are the biggest problems. Everyone's saying, make me live 10 years longer. Longevity report is now done, right? The biggest problem that we see is that needs the most support is female hormone health. There's too many women that the medical experience just sucks, right? It's taken for granted where you're supposed to have problems. It's your hormones, right? You're a hormonal woman. That's what it is. That's absolutely not true. What's happening is we don't understand how to measure and map hormones. We've done now that genetically to make all this gray area stuff very black and white, right? So again, testing a young girl, which I've done with my own niece, who, by the way, was diagnosed with an anxiety problem and was prescribed a pill. And I found out had nothing to do with her brain. It was all hormones when I looked into her DNA. Right? Because of her hormone dominance and what was happening in her monthly cycle, it was leading to this mood swing, which was diagnosed as anxiety. Right? So that's the next thing to answer your question, is we're going to come out with a suite of reports that address all the female hormone issues because we feel that's who needs the most help.
Okay. And then I have a selfish question, which I think will probably help some of our listeners. Is I just heard a talk from Ed Hallowell, and
Okay.
he's an ADHD expert. He wrote the book ADHD 2.0, and so I really identified with some of the characteristics. And he
Yeah.
says that ADHD can actually be a superpower if you understand how to leverage it fully. And I see some of these characteristics in my son. So I'm like reading it. I'm like, is this book about me, or is it about him, or is it about both
Yeah.
of us?
Yeah.
And it kind of, deepened my relationship with him because I could understand how his brain worked. And I
Yeah.
could understand better why he would clash with my wife
Yeah.
because of the way that she would communicate to him, and how his brain worked, and how my brain worked very similar. So him and I get along very well without confrontation,
Yeah.
because whatever his I don't want to say downfalls, but whatever his negative attributes are, or perceived as negative attributes, I have the same one. So I never get mad at him for leaving his clothes around, because my clothes are in a pile somewhere too, So my wife is like chasing us around,
Yeah.
always coming after us, and we eventually oblige, but it's just the way our brain works. It doesn't bother us. Whereas
Yeah.
for her, it drives her nuts. It drives her up the wall. And him and I can just look totally past it. And, this gets him in trouble at school
Yeah.
because of the way he seeks attention and such. And I'm curious if you guys have thought about putting an ADHD report, or
Yeah.
even an entrepreneur report, or something like that together, if there's been enough interest for that.
So there's actually a very specific clinician who's approached us. I think they actually work with you, came from your community, who says that I specialize in ADHD. What can you do for me? So the funny thing is that we internally in our office, there's me, who you know, Horace, who you also know, who's one of the founders. He's a product development guy. He actually makes these reports that we're looking at. And then Kashif Siddiqui, who's our chief digital officer. He's the guy that does all the digital algorithm stuff, right? We have 3 different forms of ADHD, which we've understood genetically. And we joke about this because we always catch each other, but we know why it's happening.
Mm.
And that's why we sort of forgive and forget, because we understand it's not ADHD. It's not flaky or forgetting, or so let me give you an example. Me and you, by the way, Sachin, you're the same. We have a low dopamine response. So we're constantly seeking a reward, which means I can be doing what I'm doing, but if I hear something exciting over here, I want to experience it, because reward triggers my, like, you're going to get a reaction from me.
Yep.
Right. Same thing with pleasure, right? So I could be sitting here working, and if there's a TV show or something that makes me laugh or I'm going to go to it, right? Because you and me, and that expresses as ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
What it is, like you said, a superpower. It's our ability to be entrepreneurial, our ability to see the opportunity and jump on it and do something about it, and have that burning desire in your gut to like jump on it and do it, right? So that's one. Then we have Horace, who's the flip opposite, who has the maximum dopamine binder. So when we come to our list of like 10 action items of a meeting, he's like, yeah, don't worry. Next meeting, he's done 2 of them, and 8 he didn't start, but he thinks he did them. Right? So it's this like kind of flaky behavior, which appears as ADHD. Why are you not getting your stuff done? Why is your because he experiences dopamine at such a high level that it's hard for him to take interest in stuff that isn't truly challenging or new or piquing his interest. But when he gets to that thing that is truly challenging or piquing his interest, he gets lost in it. He binges on it. So he completely forgets the other stuff, and it appears as ADHD. Then we have Kashif Siddiqui in the middle, who has a crazy serotonin imbalance. So his problem is he's constantly every stimuli, right? Somebody walks by, oh, did you go to the meeting? There's like a noise. I need to go fix this thing. He can't focus. Right? He needs to deal with everything. And he literally, it's not only he noticed it, he needs to deal with it. That truly, if you look at it from the outside, looks like ADHD, right? It's actually the opposite. He's so, where you think it's like, I can't pay attention. He's just paying super high level of attention to every stimuli around him. It doesn't mean he doesn't care about this task anymore. He's going to come back to it. But every little stimuli draws him. And it's kind of like this squirrel, like, jumping around. So
Curiosity.
Yeah. And so we've learned that a lot of, and we work with parents on their kids for this. There's so much misdiagnosis. There's no condition. It's actually a superpower that you need to harness and use to your benefit. That's what you're wired to do. Yeah.
I love it. And this would be so valuable for all parents, right?
Yeah.
To know this about their kids, and they can best support them in how they learn. They can best support them in school.
Yeah.
Their teachers can best support them. You know, the thing you talked about, Harris, is what Ed Hollowell calls finding the right difficulty,
Right.
right? So finding a task that challenges you,
Yeah.
that you know, that you immerse yourself into, and then you become like, you know, buried in it, if you will, and nothing can distract you away from it.
Yeah. You're binging, you're
Yeah.
going. And that's why Horace will come back with this stack of paper, like, look at the work I did. And we're like, wow, how did you do that? Nobody would ever dive that deep. But guess what? The other 9 things he didn't even start. Right.
Oh man, this is awesome. This could be great for like organizations, right? In
Yeah.
terms
Yeah.
of structuring their teams
How
and
do you
stuff
work
like
as a
that.
team? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna make sure. I think all of our team has the testing done, but I'm gonna double check, and if they don't, then we'll get them tested too, because this can really enhance the function of an organization
Yeah.
in understanding one another and assigning tasks, assigning, you know, and providing rewards and things like
Yeah.
that can all be tied to, you know, how our genes function.
You know, this is off topic, but when you get that done, I'll come in and we'll actually do a team mapping session. It'll be a fun exercise.
Okay.
We'll do it together. I'll work because we've done this before with some companies. So let's do that. It'll be fun.
Okay, yeah, maybe we'll do it live so everyone
Yeah,
can
we'll do it
benefit
live.
from it. And
Yeah.
if that's okay with the rest of my team, so it's certainly okay with me. But it would
Yeah.
be a great exercise for people to see, right? And then we can
Yeah.
share it, and other
Yeah, sure.
organizations can probably benefit, because there's smart people that are probably in the wrong role where they are, or
Yeah.
at the wrong company altogether. But you know, this is a great way for them to structure themselves. So thank you, Kashif. I
Yeah.
know
No, thank you.
our time always goes by very quickly. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule and spending it with us and sharing it with our community. And we will be able to, we'll also be certain to share links where people can get the testing done. And that way you can discover this about yourself, map out your genomics, figure out how long you're going to live, what you can do to live longer and a higher quality of life. Because at the end of the day, I think we all want that. So once again, thank you, my friend. And
That's
I will
awesome.
let
Thank
you
you. Pleasure.
let you get on with your busy day. Lots of love and much gratitude.
Yeah. Thanks, man.